Hi students, so in this video I'm going to show you how to plot sine or cosine graphs in Excel. Now just to start off with the basics, whenever you have sine and in bracket a function inside the sine function, it represents an angle. So this x here is an angle which could either be in degrees, which go from 0 to 360, or in radians and can go from 0 to 2 pi. So this is just the basic. Now the angle can be represented by any letter. It can be represented by x or a or a theta. They all are the same thing. They all represent an angle. Now I'm going to show you how to plot the graph. So first of all, we have to generate a series of angles, which go from either 0 to 360 or 0 to 2 pi. Now Excel returns a value of sine in radians, and hence I'm going to go from 0 to 2 pi. So first of all, over here I'll have my function that I need to plot. So let's call it x. Remember, x is just a angle. I'm going to write it over here. And it goes from 0 to pi. And how do I generate from 0 to pi? So what I'm going to do is use a formula. Let me just zoom in. This is going to be equal to and I click on my cell A2 plus pi open bracket close bracket divided by 16. Enter. Once I have one value, I can now generate the values from 0 to 360. So all I do is click on this value here, and once the arrow changes from a thick arrow to like a very thin arrow here like this, I drag it all the way down to my 35th cell. Now this will generate values from 0 all the way till 2 pi, which is 6.28. Let me zoom out now. So now that I have the angle, I can now generate my sine or cosine wave that I need to generate. And hence, what I do is I use formulae. So I'm going to say this is equal to, I'm going to name this column first. So I'm going to say this is my sine column. And this one, I'll just draw the sine graph first. So that's sine column. And over here, I have to write in the formula. So again, I'm going to zoom in. So whenever you write a formula in Excel, you always start with the equal to sign. So that's going to be equal to sine function, open bracket. So you see over here it says sine and a number. This means that Excel is expecting a number. This number can be an angle or any value. So I'm going to choose this angle here. Close bracket, enter. And then again, once the arrow changes, I just drag it down all the way till 34. So that's my sine graph. Now what we can do is we can insert a graph using Excel to show this graphically. So what I do is I highlight my data all the way till 34 and I click on insert, and then scatter. So when I click on scatter, there you go, that's my sine graph. And what I can do is make this graph look a bit better by giving it a title. So I click on layout. So I click on layout, and again over here it has options wherein I can give it a chart title. So when I click on chart title, I can say centered overlay, maybe expand this, give this, make this better, a bit bigger. Chart title could be sine graph and now I'm also going to include axis, which is very important in any graph. So horizontal axis, primary horizontal axis below. So my axis below is this axis, basically represents my values on the x-axis, which is radians, and they go from 0 to 2 pi. So that's going to be radians going from 0 to 2 pi. And then I also will include a x-axis, primary vertical axis. I'm going to say vertical display. Rotated title, looks better. And this is my sine function that I just plot. So sine function, and that's my sine graph. So that's basically how you plot a sine graph. Now what I'm going to show you is how to draw a graph for a complex angle or a compound angle. So imagine you got, say, imagine you have an angle saying 5 sine of A, or say imagine you have, say, 5 sine of A, or let's make it 75, doesn't matter. So how do I plot this? So my basic sine graph that I have plot here, I can just make a slight change in the formula and then get my plot for 75 sine A. What this means is basically 75 multiplied by sine of A. So I'm just going to make a small change here in my formula. So you see in my, let me zoom in the very first angle I have written the formula here. So what I'm going to do is introduce my 75, and in Excel you use the star sign to represent multiply, and then I get my cursor right at the very end against A2 and I press enter, and then I'm going to zoom out because I want to do this in one shot. Wait till my arrow changes and then just drag it down. Now notice what is going to happen. These numbers are going to increase in value. See? So that's my sine graph for 75 sine A2, or the angle. Now what if I had a compound angle? Say if I had sine of A plus 45, A plus, say, 45. Same thing, I can just make a change over here. So back to my formula, A2 is my angle and I add 45, enter. Again I have made a change in the first cell, wait for the I wrote the cursor to become nice and slim. That's it. And that's, oops, there's a drop here because I did not do it for the last value. There you go, nice and clean. So this is how you plot a sine graph. Now what if you have to plot multiple graphs on the same file to say compare something. So imagine this. I'm going to give you another example. Say I have 36 sine of angle. I'm going to say use the letter A, capital A, and I add, so that's my first wave, and say I have another wave which is say 56 sine of, imagine this is off phase by an angle of roughly 36 degrees, and I imagine I want to draw both of these sine waves on the same graph. How do I do that? Again, I can use the same basic file that I made for my sine graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit this file. So this wave here, the first one, I am going to just change the values over here. So the first wave that I have over here is 36 sine of A. So over here I had 75 sine of A plus 45. So I'm going to change this to 36 sine of A. Now for that reason I have to get rid of this 45 here. So that's 36 sine of A. This here, this A2 angle represents my A. Now it can be anything. Over here I have used the letter A. It could be X or theta or whatever, but that basically represents my angle. So 36 sine of A, enter. So I've done it for my first cell. Wait for the arrow to change, go all the way down to 34, and that's it. So that's my first sine wave. I'm going to name this over here. So that's sine of 36. That's going to be 36 sine of A. Now this cell here is not a formula, and hence I can get away with not writing the multiplied by sign or anything. It is just a label. It just shows me what this particular column is. Same as this one. This X is just an angle. So I could change this to whatever. I could change this to A because I'm drawing this graph here now. So I'm going to say that is A. Always remember X, A, these are just letters which represent something. In this case, an angle. They are called variables. So that's my sine graph, 36 sine of A. Now my second function is 56 sine A plus 36. I'm going to plot that. So I'm going to write it down here quickly. 56 sine of 56 sine, click in there, A plus 36. Double click here. So now I'm going to enter this 56 sine A plus 36 in the formula. So again, equal to 56 times, that's the star sign, sine of my angle, oops, be very careful, so that's open bracket, angle A2 plus 36, close bracket, enter, and then just drag it down. That will generate my sine wave. Now always make sure that this here is your angle. You could accidentally click B2, which will give you a completely different graph, so just be careful while drawing this graph here. And now it's time to compare these two graphs. So basically I just highlight the data, all of it. Oops, there's a small problem here, my last value is missing, so there you go, calculated. Highlight all of the data, go insert, scatter, and scatter with smooth lines. There you go. So that's my first sine wave, that's 36 sine A, and second sine wave, which is 56 sine A plus 36. Now it's always good to present your work properly, so I am going to make this chart as big as possible. Also give it a nice layout, so go on layout, click on layout, and then chart title, centered overlay, and I'm going to say this is comparison of sine graph. So that's comparison of sine waves, and then also give it a horizontal axis below. So this is my x-axis here, which is in radians. So I'm going to give it a title, radians, ranging from 0 to 2 pi, and also give it a x-axis, vertical title. Oops, not this one, control plus Z, axis title, rotated title. This is my sine function. Sine function. That's it. Now, what if I wanted to add these two sine waves and show the resultant? So how do you do that? So again, you can do it in Excel and also show it on this same graph for a comparison. It's basically going to be a wave which is addition of these two waves. It's just simply going to be the addition of this point here and that point there. So I'm going to add these two waves now. So you can say just copy this, copy, and then click, right click, paste, plus copy this cell, right click, copy, double click, paste, enter. Put this as much as you can. Now how do you add these two waves? It's simple, it's very simple. It's just an addition formula. So that's going to be equal to this cell here plus that cell, and enter. And once I have generated my value for the first angle, I simply drag it down and job done. Now how do I get this graph, how do I get this data here on my graph? So again, it is simple. You simply right click, you click on select data, and over here legend entries you add, and now here series name, it's going to be, so be careful while entering the data over here. You don't need to enter the value, you have to type it down. So that's 36 sine of, open bracket, A close bracket, plus 56 sine of, open bracket, A plus 36 close bracket, Now my x values I'm going to choose now. Click. My x-axis is this axis, which is my radians, so that is my angles. Click. And my y values are is this. Click. Now you see the problem is it's going off. How do you solve this problem? That is because it has highlighted this letter over here as well, and Excel doesn't recognize letters, it only recognizes numbers. So click, y values, click again, first to the last, click OK, and then once this is done, press OK again, and that's my value. Now there's a small mistake here, I haven't calculated it for the last value. No problem, just highlight it, make sure that the arrow changes, drag it down, drop down. So this is a comparison of sine waves, and these are the 3 sine waves that you have. Now whenever you are presenting this data, especially for a question of a higher marks, you must be absolutely sure that you have your graph as labeled as possible. It should have a title, it should have a x-axis, y-axis, x-axis, what the x-axis means, and also all the 3 functions presented properly. And this is how you plot a sine graph on Excel.